Can I start?
Yes, good afternoon, Dr. Charlotte, and good afternoon to all the participants. Can you hear me, Dr. Charlotte?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly. Please just allow me to introduce the session and then we can begin. I just want to also stipulate a few housekeeping rules as well before we can begin, if that's fine with you there. So please note that this session is being recorded and the recording has started. Welcome to the Research Capacity Development Unit at the Postgraduate School, University of Johannesburg. I'm thrilled to guide you today's session as your moderator. Let's make this session engaging and insightful. I would like to start off by thanking all the participants, all the attendees rather, for taking the time to join this session. And most importantly, our esteemed facilitator from the Faculty of Health Science to guide us through this thesis format and submission procedure, Dr. Charlotte Mokoke. Um, Thank you so much for availing yourself today and for honoring my invite here at the Research Capacity Development Unit to facilitate this important session. Before beginning or before I introduce Dr. Charlotte by reading her bio, I would like to go over a few housekeeping rules, of which I'd like to think most of you are aware of. So if you do have any question during the session, please kindly raise your virtual hand and I will indicate to the presenter to address your question. As I've mentioned that this session is being recorded and the presentation slides will be requested from Dr. Charlotte, and we will post the recording for this session together with the presentation slides for your reference. Um, in that regard, please allow me to read over Dr. Charlotte's bio. Dr. Charlotte is a registered environmental health practitioner who joined the University of Johannesburg in April 2011. She has 22 years of experience in professional environmental health, 1 year at the Northwest Provincial Health as an EHP, another year at the Gauteng Provincial Health as a community liaison officer for health promotion, 6 years at the City of Johannesburg Metropolitan Municipality and promoted to an operations manager for environmental health and including the 14th year in academia up to date. Her research areas include environmental health management and legislation, health promotion, food control, and food safety. She has supervised to completion 12 master's students and is currently supervising 23 master's and 6 PhD level students. Dr. Charlotte also serves as a member of the Faculty of Health Sciences Research Ethics Committee and is a National Council member of the South African Institute on Environmental Health. So without any further ado, I would like to hand over to Dr. Charlotte. You may now proceed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can I share the slides on my side?
Yes, you can share as I have stopped sharing from my side. Thank you.
Okay. Can you see my slide? But I know they
Yes,
are not in presentation mode yet.
yes, I can see a slide at this point. And to the participants as well, please just kindly indicate with a thumbs up if you can see slides with a thumbs up. Okay, perfect. I
Okay.
think we can all see a slide. Yes.
Thank you. I just want to do something before I put it on presentation mode because I want to
Okay.
see a few responses in the chat. Good afternoon, everyone. As introduced, my name is Charlotte Mukwatle. I am from the Department of Environmental Health in the Faculty of Health Sciences, and I'm based at Doornfontein campus. You know, it's very interesting when you hear that profile being read about work related matters, professional matters. But I always say that is not all we are, and there's always a lighter side, depending on how you look at it, or maybe it's the heavier side. that I always can share about myself. I am married. I am a mother of three. My son is 16, and I have twin girls, and they were turning 4 years yesterday. And I can tell you, when they were born in 2021, when I went back to the maternity ward and they were teaching me how to breastfeed the twins at the same time, immediately when they went to sleep, I was thinking about my doctoral degree. I was thinking about my thesis in the maternity ward at the hospital after delivering the twins. And that is the truth. And this is because once you register for the PhD, it becomes part of you. It follows you everywhere. If you are married, it becomes a second spouse. And unfortunately, with it, it's in community of property because it's part of you. You can't let it go until it is completed.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
just on a lighter note, to say, yes, we are all here. We are all registered for PhDs, and the PhDs is a part of us. There's no running away from that. But I want to get a sense of the audience. I know we are at different levels of our PhD. I saw some of my students that have joined, and I know we are still in the proposal stages. Maybe some are advanced, maybe some are writing up. I saw an email of someone saying, I'm about to submit on the 31st of August. And I was like, yay, that is interesting. Please do join the session because I will also share a little bit about what is happening after submission. But just to get a sense, maybe you can put in the chat at what level you are. You can just say proposal, data collection, data analysis, or editing, or, you know, final draft ready, something like that. So I just get a sense of the participants and how far they are. Maybe we can just take a minute to do that and then I'll look at the chat. Okay, I see Mapula is a data collection. I see Wellington, final edits, submitting. Somewhere next week, I see more data collection. Macmillan, hi, how are you? I see you. Proposal stage. Data collection. I see more on proposal stage. Oh, I also see some are also at conceptualization stage. And I like what Malif is saying everything all at once. Sometimes it does happen that you're doing everything all at once. And I will share some of my experiences. Writing up chapter 1 and 2, needs to submit next year, proposal, data collection. I'm writing, still on results. I'm finalizing. TK Lady, I see you. You're at proposal stage, systematic review, awaiting renewal of ethics approval, etc. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for your responses. I get a sense now that literally everyone at different stages is in the room. So let me put my presentation on presentation mode so that it's easy for me to move the slides. Slideshow. Are we on slideshow? Can I get a yes by voice?
Yes, perfect. We are on slideshow.
Okay.
And
Okay.
can all the participants just indicate with a thumbs up as well? If you can all see it on top. Okay, perfect. Yeah, we can proceed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I am going to cover the Faculty of Health Sciences thesis by chapters. I will also cover how you can do the thesis by articles. So for those that are still in the initial stages, doing their proposals, then they'll get a feel of the two and get to decide in consultation with their supervisors on what is the best way to go. And then I will also touch on the Faculty of Health Sciences oral defense, which is something that has been introduced In my time, it was not there. I didn't get the opportunity to do the oral defense, but now it's something that is introduced to say, in addition to the thesis examination, the student also does an oral defense. So I am going to touch on that as well. And then I'm also going to touch on my personal experiences, how my PhD went, what were some of the challenges, maybe highlights, and then maybe also share with you some take-home tips, which those that are in the beginning or in the middle may be able to grasp and try out. It's mostly from my personal experiences, but you know, when you're doing the PhD, you also attend a lot of workshops similar to this ones, also a lot of writing workshops. So you get to learn some tips from other people as well. And I will be sharing that. And I'll also be sharing an experience of one of our recent graduates who has also done his PhD thesis by article. So my one was by chapters. So I will share the two, and that is the overview of my presentation. So as I've indicated, the first format that you can do the thesis is by chapters. This is the traditional way of doing it. That is how many years we've been doing it. But obviously, when times have changed and we have advanced, there is also doing the thesis by articles, meaning by publications, and we'll go through the two formats. But the one format, which is the thesis by chapters, it is where you compile your thesis with traditional chapters, having about 6 or 7 chapters from your introduction to literature review methodology, and then your results, your discussion, your recommendations. Those are the nice traditional chapters which would take the reader from A to Z of your study and what you have done in the study. And that is the thesis by chapters. Usually with the thesis by chapters, you would have your thesis, all your chapters compiled together, and then you need one article that is published. So by the time you submit for examination, you have your thesis, you have one article that has already been published. Otherwise, you cannot submit for examination. That is one of the requirements. And then the other articles can be submitted to a journal or under review or even still in draft. That will be accepted. But at least one of the articles must be published for you to submit for examination and be examined. And then when you write the thesis by chapters, one of the critical things is to refer to the Faculty of Health Sciences guidelines for the preparation of thesis, dissertations, and research report. We have the guidelines. I'm sure you can access it on the faculty website or even under your departmental website. Or if you are not able to locate it, you can get it from your supervisor. You can even get it from the faculty officer. I'm sure you guys know our faculty officer is Rihanna, and she's very prompt with responses to the postgraduate students. She will send you the guidelines. And this is actually a Bible that you need to have to always refer to when you are writing up. We have a separate guideline for the proposal, but right now we're talking about the thesis. So we have this guideline specifically for writing up. It takes you through the format, the structure, all the things that you need to include, the layout, and everything that you need to take cognizance of when you are writing. And it even explains to say in chapter 1, when you're doing introduction and background, what is it that you need to include up to the last chapter, up to the references, up to the appendices. It includes everything. So if you are writing your thesis by chapters, please, I hope you have this guideline with you. If not, you can ask your supervisor to share it so that you make sure that you are following the Faculty of Health Sciences guidelines. Also very critical. Sometimes you find that your main supervisor is external, is not a UJ person. And wherever they are working, maybe they are from another university, UP or UKZN, and they know a format that side. Please share the guidelines with them so that they don't make you do things now outside the Faculty of Health Sciences guidelines. Because you will send things to the main supervisor. Then when it comes to course supervisors who are internal at UJ, they make you change. So it's very critical that right at the beginning, if you have an external supervisor, maybe the person is a visiting research associate and they are not so familiar with our guidelines, they know a format of another university, you make them familiar as a student, as their main as the person is your main supervisor. So that is the one format that you can choose to do your thesis. The second one is obviously the thesis by articles, meaning here it's a compilation of the thesis using the articles that have been published in accredited journals. And I want you to take note of that. Articles that have been published in accredited journals. Usually every year in the university, we receive a list of accredited journals from the Department of Higher Education and Training. So we have a list of the journals that are accredited that even we as staff members are required to publish on. So you don't just go online and choose any journal, because we do know some journals are predatory, and maybe sometimes as a student you wouldn't even be sure if a journal is accredited or not. You can verify with your supervisor and say, is this journal accredited? I came across it. Is it accredited? Can we publish on it? Can I start looking into it, checking their guidelines so that I can follow to prepare the publication? And then your supervisor will be able to guide you accordingly. But just remember, it needs to be an accredited journal so that it counts. And obviously you don't want your reputation to be attached to a predatory journal of some sort. And then with the thesis by articles, the requirement is that you cannot have less than 4 articles published for a doctoral thesis. So you need to have 4 articles published for you to compile that thesis by articles and then submit for examination. If you're going to have more than that, maybe it was going to be 5 or 6, it means the other 2 can be submitted or they can be under review or even still in draft, but definitely not less than 4 articles that are published for you now to go through for examination if you are doing the thesis by articles. We also have a set of guidelines that we have for thesis by articles, and it is the Faculty of Health Sciences guidelines on thesis or dissertation in article or essay format. That's the title of the guidelines. These are not very lengthy because they actually build on the other guidelines. You will see later when I go into the different sections of the thesis. Actually, even when you do the articles, you follow some things from the other guidelines in terms of like your fonts, your pages, how you need to make sure that you are consistent, the referencing, how you put appendices together. You still do it even in the thesis by article. So this guideline, you will see it's quite short because it's building on the other guidelines for the chapters in terms of other structural matters. If you have any questions, we will have time for questions at the end. So allow me to continue. You can just make a note of your questions and then we will entertain the questions at the end of the presentation. So ladies and gentlemen, these are the 2 formats that you can do your thesis on. Obviously, it's not your sole decision. You are the student here. You do consult with those that are assisting you in the process, that are experts in the area of your research, your supervisors, to say what would be best, especially if you consider your research focus area. Because maybe sometimes you are doing something that will be better told in a story rather than in article format, bits and pieces of different articles that are published. But we do know even if you're doing it by chapters, eventually the idea would be that you need to have a publication. Even if you have one, after the results are finalized, you need to at least have a second and even a third publication of some sort. So in consultation with your supervisors, you will be able to determine, are we going the thesis by chapters or are we going the thesis by articles? And then I want to go into the thesis format, which will cover both if you're doing it by chapters or also if you're doing it by articles. And this is what is in the guidelines. So the first thing is you would have your title page. Please make sure your title is correct according to what was approved. When you have your HDC approval, it states the title. Sometimes when you go to REC, they might suggest a tweak in the title from the ethics committee and you go with that suggestion. Please make sure that if your title is amended at any point in your study, that is approved at higher degrees committee and you get a new letter with the title, and that's the title that you will have on your title page. Normally after HDC approval and REC approval, all the titles are put on the system. So that title that is on the system must match the title on your title page, because that's the title that will go on your thesis. Even the day you are graduating, it will go in the graduation book. So just make sure the title is correct, it's written correctly as it was approved. And all the details on the title page are correct. Your name, your surname, all your full names are there, your student number and your supervisor's names, and you would usually put a date. So in the guidelines, there's even an example of how the title page should be, where you would even put your supervisor's name. And on the bottom right-hand corner, you would say, for example, Johannesburg 2025. So there's a way that you do that title page. Please make sure you follow the guidelines as they are. And you know, someone might say these are light things, but I can tell you these are some of the things that would waste your time, because the moment the title page is not correct, the supervisor will return it to you and say, correct the title page. And you should avoid those little mistakes that would be your time stealers. And then following the title page is your declaration, the candidate's declaration. I already saw yesterday, I was looking at one of my master students, they've designed their own declaration. Again, in the guidelines, there's a way that you put your declaration. They even make an example of the wording that you put in the declaration. Don't go to AI and ask for a declaration and put an AI declaration. It must be your declaration. And you put a signature to it and you put a date as well to say that you are declaring that this is your work, mainly your own original work, and also mainly that you haven't submitted this work at another university. That's mainly what the declaration is about, and it follows the title page. And then after that would be the abstract. I always say the abstract is very critical, because if I'm sitting in the foot of the examiner, this is the first thing they read, you know. So write the abstract in a very interesting way. It should give as concisely as possible the significant facts, especially the contribution of the study, the main conclusions and recommendation. I always say to my students, attract the examiner with that abstract. When they read that abstract, they should already say, wow, and then I'm looking forward to reading this entire thesis, or at master's level, this entire dissertation. So usually the guideline would say 350 words for a doctoral thesis, but it's not restrictive, because I mean, mine was way more than this. Even the one I saw yesterday was way more than this, because there's normally a lot to tell, especially because it's a thesis. It's not like a journal article where they really restrict you. So in the thesis, it is a bit flexible, and you agree with the supervisor until that abstract is in such a way that it captures all the significant facts. It captures the contribution of your PhD, because with the PhD, definitely there is always a major contribution, and your conclusions and recommendations. So That is the abstract that will then follow after the declaration. And then we move to dedication. And all this that I'm mentioning now is both when you are doing the thesis by chapters and also when you are doing the thesis by articles. So your title page, your declaration, your abstract, it's the same, both in the thesis by chapters and also in the one for articles. So after the abstract, you would have your dedication. I think this is the most wonderful part of the thesis. And I'm going to talk about the dedication a little bit later in my tips. But this is where you write your own personal thing, your own personal part of the thesis to say, I am dedicating this thesis to my parents, to my spouse, to my children, to my siblings, to colleagues, whoever that was part of your journey, you are dedicating this PhD thesis to. This is the most enjoyable part. You write it with a smile and you write it, especially if you're going to write it at the end, you are writing it with some level of proudness to say, wow, I have fulfilled this to these people. Let me dedicate it. I've seen people like, for example, I did my PhD, my father had passed already, mentioning them in the PhD, to say if you were around, da 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 da. So the dedication really is your personal touch to the thesis. I always wonder, do examiners even ever read the dedication? I doubt. I think the thesis is too huge that they would even spend some time. Maybe some would read it at the end. If you've had a very interesting thesis, which is a wow, maybe they would want to also go see whom you've dedicated to. But yes, the dedication is there for a reason as well. And then after the dedication, you would have your acknowledgements. And I always say to students, make sure that you acknowledge everyone that deserves to be acknowledged, especially if your study was funded. Acknowledge the people that have funded you, acknowledge your supervisors, no matter the relationship with the supervisors at the end of the PhD. It is academically correct to acknowledge the supervisors. I know that maybe there is difficult supervisors out there. I'm saying that in inverted commas, but I'm going to talk a little bit about supervisors, just one sentence later on about the supervisors. But yes, no matter the relationship, no matter what happened in between, you do acknowledge the supervisors, all of them, your funders. If you use the research assistants and you want to acknowledge them as well, you're welcome to acknowledge them. I think even with acknowledgements, it's a bit of a personal touch. There's no restriction on how you must acknowledge who and what not, but just to say it's academically correct to acknowledge all the contributors of the project. And then after acknowledgements, then you would move. We are now going through a typical thesis on how it looks like. Then there would be your table of contents. And there is no doubt the table of content must be automated. Some examiners may be interested in looking at your results first before they even look at the literature review. So on the table of content, when they go to the chapter for the results, maybe chapter 4, and they click on that on the table of content, it must jump to chapter 4. They shouldn't go down a mouse. That's the old-fashioned way. So if you don't know how to automate your table of content, there's a lot of YouTube videos, assistant online that will take you through how you do an automated table of content, and do it right at the beginning so that when anything changes, even when your supervisors change certain things, it's very easy just to update the table of content and it updates automatically. I've seen with some students, they will say it's automated, but when you click on something, it changes everything. It changes the page numbers, and then it picks up some subtitles and some introductory sentences and moves them to the table of content. It means something was not done correctly there. So you need to just double check that you've automated it correctly. And this is not for you, this is for the reader and mainly your examiners. Like I say, some examiners may want to jump. Maybe they've read chapter 1, your introduction and background, and they want to jump to results. Some examiners may want to see your figures. When you're talking about certain things, maybe they're reading the abstract and there's an interesting finding in your abstract. And when they go to figures, you are referring to a figure and they want to jump to that figure immediately. They must be able to do that with very ease, without any complications. So take time to also look at that table of content, that it is done correctly and it is automated correctly. And then after the table of contents, we're moving down. Then you would have your list of figures. Just make sure that your figures are numbered correctly. Usually the preference is by chapter and numbering. So if you are in chapter 1, your figures would be 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. If you are in chapter 2, your figures would then say 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and so forth. Even with the tables, that is the preference. But remember, departments also and supervisors may prefer other things. These are not things that are prescriptive, but consult with your supervisor from the beginning on what is the preference rather than doing it in a particular way, because some students would just have figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, figure 4, figure 5, figure 6 as the figures are going down the chapters. And then the supervisor will say, but I can't see which one belongs in which chapter. Then they want you to put a chapter in the numbering. So even those things, have a light discussion with your supervisor and say, how would you prefer this? I've opted to do it like this. Am I on the right track? Obviously, there's a lot of information online as well that may also convince you to do other things. Sometimes it's very easy. You go to the thesis on the library database in your department. That's also another way of doing it. If your supervisor is Dr. Mkwatle, go online and check the thesis and the dissertations that Dr. Mkwatle has done with his or her student and see how the structure looks like. That will also give you a sense of how the supervisor prefers some of the things, because you will get a sense, especially with very renowned supervisors, our profs and so on, they would, follow a certain pattern with their students. So you can look and say, okay, all the students that were supervised by my supervisor, you can search even on the database by supervisor. You search your own supervisor there and you look at the work that they've done with other students. How is the structure of the thesis? Like I say, if you look at our thesis in environmental health, there are certain things that we add a little bit of touch-ups there because it's environmental health, it's public health. And then when you go to nursing, they do it in a particular way, maybe because a lot of them is qualitative studies, they follow a certain pattern and so on. Ours mainly is quantitative studies, So get along and find what is relevant to your department, what is preferred in your department, in your field of studies, and put them accordingly so that they are relevant. So then follows the list of tables, exactly even what I've said. You will see, for example, in our department, the tables are even colored, they bring some color to the document. Maybe in some departments, they want plain white tables. It's a simple thing, but you'll be surprised that then it's something that will be your time stealer as well. You'll do it in a particular way. The supervisor says, no, 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 put colors in your tables. It makes it different to this and that. So find the preference, find what is applicable in your department, and then do it accordingly from the first hand. Then those small things do not become your time stealers. And then you would have, for example, symbols. It also depends on your research focus area. There are some units or departments that have a lot of symbols that are used in the niche, in the research niche area. And, if you have a lot of them, then you would put all your symbols. Maybe you're doing a very technical study that has a lot of formulas, it's lab related. Then you have a lot of symbols for formulas for substances that you are using in the lab. Make sure that you've got all those symbols and you've also written them accordingly to the research niche or the field of study. These small things makes a lot of difference to the quality of the thesis that you are providing. And then we also have your acronyms, your abbreviations, if it's necessary, also depending on your research focus area, your niche, your department, you would also include a definition of terms. If you are using a lot of technical terms, then you would put them right in the beginning and you put a list of definition of terms and then you define them, and also you even put the references in those definition of terms so that it's very clear that you have sourced that information from reputable sources. So similar with the thesis by chapters and the thesis by articles, these are just the things in the beginning that are common in both formats. I'm going to move. Now we come to the crux of it, the chapters. So the initial beautification and formatting is done. It looks good. You've got all your abstracts, your list of tables, your figures. They're all looking good. They are nice. You can picture taking the reader down. Now we go into the chapters. The other thing that I also want to just highlight is the numbering of the thesis, the page numbering. Some student would just put page 1 from the title page. That is not correct. The title page is not supposed to have a numbering. And then what comes after the title page? Your declaration, your dedication, your acknowledgements. Then they would continue, those that didn't put a number in the title, then they continue with those pages as page 2, page 3. That's not the right way of doing it. You need to put the Roman figures for those initial pages. Ideally, page 1 should start on chapter 1, on the actual chapters. So when we look at the format now of doing the actual chapters, the traditional chapters, your introductory chapter, which is your chapter 1 and your chapter 2. Firstly, in chapter 1, you would do your introduction and background. This is where you are introducing the study. You are also giving the background of the study. One of the things I've seen in this particular aspect is that the students would tend to repeat themselves. Guard against repeating yourself, because sometimes you put something in the introduction, you're repeating it again in the background. There's a very thin line between introduction and background, so you need to be very careful what you will put in the introduction when you are introducing the study, and then giving the background of what other authors have done around your area of research. And then chapter 2 would be your literature review. You need to do an intensive literature review. You don't do literature review in your second year, write the literature chapter, and then you use the exact same literature review in your fourth year, and then just add chapter 3. No, literature review, you do it right until the last day before you submit for examination, because new information always comes forth. You might have said somewhere in your literature review, which I always ask students to avoid, this study is the first of its kind. Maybe when you did the literature review in 2024, January, it was the first of its kind. And then January 2025, you might find that there is updates, because right now you don't know if someone else is submitting a proposal somewhere very similar to you, and then just in a different context or a different country. And then by the time you say this is the first of its kind, that person has published a paper with new findings that have an influence on your study. So you need to take that into consideration. Otherwise, the examiners, remember, they are the so-called experts in your field. They have probably read that paper, and if you have not acknowledged it, then those are some of the reasons they will say, correct this. And some of them would actually indicate to you in writing, you didn't add this paper. They even add the papers for you. and say you didn't add this paper and this paper and that paper that you have looked at into this and this and this and this, and this is not captured in your study. Correct and resubmit. Now you are resubmitting and you could have avoided that. So do a thorough literature review, continuous literature review up until right at the end before you submit for examination. And then I'm going to go to the central chapters. We are still doing the thesis by chapters, traditional chapters. Chapter 3 would be your methodology. Obviously, you have done the methodology, you've collected the data, you describe the methodology in detail. Do not leave the reader with question mark. And when you write, always remember, you're not writing for you. This is your study. You're also not writing for the supervisors. The supervisors are on the same side with you. You and the supervisors, this is your study together. You are writing for the reader. And in this case, you are writing for the examiner. You must make sure you are explaining things in such a way that you will not leave the examiner with question marks. When they read this and they're like, okay, I can see, but how did you do this part? You know, so when you are writing, always remember, I'm writing for the examiner. I'm taking the examiner through my journey of what I have done in the study. Don't leave anything out. Don't leave the simple things out. Otherwise, then the examiner will have questions and that will warrant you to explain and resubmit. Chapter 4 is the results or the findings of the study, the most interesting part, because this is where now you will show the contribution of your study, what you found, is it in alignment with other authors? But one of the comments I received from one of my examiners in the results, because what I was doing, I was giving the results and sort of explaining, and then she said, in this chapter, you only focus on the results. Don't explain the results because now that is discussion. So she said, I must move every part where I was explaining the results, I must move it to the discussion session. Chapter 4 is purely results, purely the findings of the study. You're talking about what you found, answering the objectives, and make sure you are outlining results for all the objectives of the study. So objective such that at the end, you will see a lot of supervisors at the end, they would even want you to add a summary and say, for objective 1, this is how the results are answering to objective 1. This is how the results are answering to objective 2. This is how the results are answering to objective 3. Just to make sure that you have covered the results for all the objectives, especially if you have a big study. Some of you have 4, 5, 6, even 7 objectives, because depending on the type of the PhD you are doing and the nature of the PhD and the research niche that you are in, you might have a lot of objectives. So the central chapters, chapter 3, chapter 4, this is the part that says it is the actual thesis, because ideally, the beginning chapters, the introduction, the background, the literature review, is actually what is known. You are just presenting what is known around your topic, what other people have found, have discovered, have argued, have concluded, have highlighted. You've just put that together to make it a story that is interesting. So in the guidelines, you will see it says the student should therefore take great pain to present his or her material in a clear and orderly fashion, in terms that will be readily understood. And that is the results and the findings. This is the crux. Both the methodology and the results, this is the crux. This is now what you have done as Charlotte in your study and what you have found. So take time for this component and yes, present it in such a way that it is yours and you have owned it. And now the concluding chapters. So your chapter 5 would be your discussion, and this is where you are discussing the results. And again, you make sure you discuss all the results. And then your conclusion and recommendations would be chapter 6. What I have found with many of the students that I supervise, even those that have graduated at master's level. In the conclusion and the recommendations, they don't make reference to other literature. And it's one of the things I've picked up with more than 5 students. So even in the guidelines, it does say, refer to the relevant literature that supports arguments and outcomes. So whatever you are arguing, or whatever your conclusions are arguing, or whatever you are recommending, always supports those recommendations. Those are your recommendations. But if you support them, even with literature, to say it aligns with this, even if it does not align, you must say, contrary to this author, they found this and this and this and this. But our study found this and this and this and that. That is the conclusions. And then we are recommending this and this and this and that. And actually what we are recommending was also recommended by author A and author B. So always refer to relevant literature that supports arguments and outcomes, even in your conclusion and your recommendations. And, you know, even when you are writing recommendations, you must write all of them. You know, students have the tendency of just putting 1 or 2 or 3 recommendations. Write recommendations that will influence policy, that will influence societal norms, that will influence culture, that will influence models. Think of all components of your research and your niche area and what your PhD will influence at the end of the day, and put all of them together. Like I said, you are writing for the reader. Don't leave the reader with question marks. Don't leave the examiner saying, but what about this? What about that? You didn't capture this. You didn't capture that. Because then that gives them grounds for now wanting you to capture it and return back to them, which is not what we want. So that was the thesis by traditional chapters. You'd have your chapter 1 up to chapter 6, how I've outlined it, and what to look out for. Now we come to thesis by articles. Remember the same format of those initial aspects that we cover, your dedication, your acknowledgements, your list of figures, you would have those. And then chapter 1, you would have your introduction. This is where you do a thorough introduction of the study as chapter 1. And then at the end of the chapter, you would have the references that you have used in that chapter. That is chapter 1. And then chapter 2, for example, would be your literature review. Again, you do a detailed literature review of your research, your focus area, covering all components. If you look at, if I make my study, for example, I did my study on lead exposure in children. Then you introduce what is lead exposure, what is happening internationally, what is happening in Asia, what is happening in other African countries, what is happening in the sub-Saharan, what is happening in South Africa. You would give a comprehensive literature review of the focus of the research. And then you would give your references as well. At the end of the literature review, you also add your references. That is chapter 2. Chapter 3, because remember you are doing it by articles, you would already have your 4 articles published. So I take it chapter 3 then is your systematic review article. Sometimes you did a critical review, you published it, or you did a scoping review, you published it, or you did a systematic review, you published it. That was your first article. Then that would be chapter 3. So when you put it, it's chapter 3, and then you would say, this chapter makes reference to the systematic review that was published, titled, you put the title, and then you put the link with the DOI. And then after that, you put the actual article. So that's the article. At the end, it will be the references, exactly the way the article was published. Then that would be your chapter 3. And then chapter 4, I take it, for example, you have published your protocol, because you can publish your protocol just right after the protocol is approved at HTC and REC. You can publish the protocol. For example, I also published my protocol. So if it was by articles, then chapter 4 would be your protocol. So you would say chapter 4 and you say study protocol, and then you would introduce it. This chapter focuses on the study protocol that was published, titled, you put the title, you put the link with the TOI number. So ideally, that is your methodology, because in the protocol, you've explained what you are going to do in the study, your data collection methods, your tools and everything. Then you put the actual protocol exactly as it was published, right at the end with the references. That is your chapter 4. And then we go to chapter 5. Remember, here you have your 4 articles. So your chapter 5 then would be your 3rd article. Maybe it was on the results for objective 1. And this is why I said in the beginning, you need to sit with your supervisors if you're going to do a format of articles and discuss it properly and see if indeed you will have the 4 articles published to put the thesis together. So let's say you've published your results for the first objective. Then it's chapter 5. You introduce chapter 5. This chapter focuses on the results for objective 1, which was da 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 da. The article was published as, you put the title, you put the link, and then you put the actual article as it was published in that journal. That will be your chapter 5. Remember, it's probably about 16 pages, because you've got your introduction, you've got your this, you've got your methodology, you've got your results, but it was focusing on objective 1. And then the 4th article now, maybe it was results for objective 2. Again, here you introduce the chapter. This was focusing on objective 2. This article focused on this and this and this, published, titled S, and then you put the title, you put the TOI, and then you put the actual article as it was published up to references, and then that is your chapter 6. And then you introduce chapter 7, where you would have now your conclusion and recommendations. So conclusion and recommendations, now you are giving conclusions and recommendations for the entire study. I've seen how one of the students has done it nicely, where in the conclusion, then they would say, the literature review concludes this. The systematic review article concludes that. The study protocol concludes that. The article for objective 1 concludes that. Chapter 6, results for objective 2 concludes that. And then in summary, our study concludes da 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 da. And then you put the recommendations. Also in chapter 7, you would include things like the limitations of the study. So even before the recommendations, you would include the limitations of the study. You would include the strengths of the study. You would include how the study influences policy, how the study influences public health, how you would include all of those. And then what are some of the gaps for future research? You would include all of those in chapter 7, and then your recommendations. And then you would include all the references. Remember, I said here the recommendations, you also add literature reference to your recommendations. Then this chapter would also have its own references at the end, which you have used in this chapter. And that is the end of the thesis by article. After that, it will be your appendices, and then you are done. So you can see how comprehensive it is. But the interesting thing is with this one, because you've already published the article, there is not much you will do, for example, chapter 3, 4, 5, 6, but you would have done the difficult work right in the beginning, because we all know what it takes to put an article together. It goes to a journal, it goes under review, and then it is sent back to correct and so forth. And then by the time it is published, you would have gone through that pain, because remember, in the thesis by chapters, we said the central chapters, you should, invest in them. So here, you would have invested in those central chapters, chapter 3, 4, 5, 6. You would have definitely invested in these chapters during the process of getting those papers published. But definitely it means at the end of this process, compared to the thesis by chapters where you have one article published, here you have 4 articles published. Your PhD is out there, you know, unlike the other format where you have one article published, you pass, you graduate, and then after that, you sit now with the eagerness to want to publish your result and so forth. And we all know life does happen. I can tell you now, I've done paper 2. I'm working on paper 3 now, because I do want my work not to end up just in my thesis. I wanted all of it, all the outcomes, all the results to be published. So I did the first paper, I did the second paper. Now the supervisor is still on my neck. Charlotte, we need to publish that third paper. And I also want to publish that third paper. But if you get someone who is your PhD and maybe who's not in academia, some of you are doing the PhD, but you are in industry. After you graduate and you are done, you are no longer interested in publishing, and you are like, I have my PhD. The supervisor can even publish the work on their own and just put you as a second author or so. But with us, it's different because in academia, we do know we are all required to publish. But this format now would have done the other part, but you would have also invested in it right much earlier before you even submit for examination. So that is the thesis by article. And then for both of them, remember you need to acknowledge all the sources that you have used, all your references in text, and at the end, if it's the thesis by chapter, make sure that all your references are there at the end, reflecting accordingly. And there is no way that you can do the referencing like manually. I mean, I did referencing manually in my master's. It was a nightmare. And some of them I missed, and some of them were missing a comma or a full stop. Those days are over. We now use referencing tools. There's Mendeley, there is RefWorks. Currently in the university, we are using EndNote. So even as students, you have access to EndNote. You register, you start building your references. Whilst you are even doing the proposal, you start building your references there. At a click of a button, then your referencing list will be done. Even with the thesis by article, obviously that one, you will have all your references at the end of each chapter. But just be consistent, especially if you are doing the method by chapters. Be very consistent. We usually use Harvard method. I know most departments in the faculty use Harvard method, but I do know, for example, in EMC, some of the colleagues in EMC use Vancouver, but be consistent. Even with Harvard, I know in our department, for example, it's just the author in the year, but I know I've seen in nursing and also medical imaging and radiation, they want even the page numbers. So to be the author, the year, and but if you are doing the format where you are putting page numbers, it means each and every single author, then you must have the page numbers. Or where there's no page numbering, then you follow the format of saying not dated, no page numbers, and things like that. If maybe it's a report or it's a source. And I also want to reiterate here, you must use all possible sources. You know, in my PhD, I was, because it's public health, I was referring to WHO reports, I was referring to legislation, I was referring to policies. And in Harvard method, they show you very well if you are referring to a policy, a legislation, an act, how you reference it. Even if you are referring to a personal conversation, how you reference it. You know, if you are referring to a report, if you are referring to a web page, how you reference it. So it doesn't only have to be articles that have been published in journals. You must refer to all the sources possible, depending on your niche, your focus area, also depending on the discipline, because styles of citations vary from discipline to discipline. So again here, consult with your supervisor, what method is used, Harvard to what extent, like I've made the example, We don't really put the page numbers, but you find that in medical imaging, they want Harvard method and they want page numbers in text. Or maybe in nursing, they want page numbers in text. So looking at those previous theses from other students, it will help you to see what your supervisor was doing. Unless they've changed, they will indicate accordingly to you. But be consistent and make sure you have acknowledged all the sources in your thesis. And then obviously after your references or after all your chapters, you will have your appendices. Again, all must be made reference to in the text and labeled logically. So if in the text you have the questionnaire as Appendix 6, it must be Appendix 6 in the list. If you have the information letter, the consent forms that you've used, make sure that you've made reference to them under the ethics section, Appendix 7, Appendix 8. They also show accordingly in the list as Appendix 7, Appendix 8. Even in the table of content, they're showing accordingly. So make sure there is consistency throughout. And then they follow each other logically as they follow each other in the thesis. It makes it nice and clean and easy to read. And in the appendices, you must include your approval letters as well. You need to have under the ethics part where you say the study was approved at the Higher Degrees Committee of the Faculty of Health Sciences, in brackets, Appendix 2. And then it was also approved in the Research Ethics Committee, in brackets, Appendix 3. And you must have them as appendices as well. The study was also approved by the Gauteng Department of Health, Appendix 4. You must have it in the appendices as well. Don't leave other appendices out. Otherwise, I'll be honest with you, sometimes it does irritate even supervisors, but I don't want to say the examiners. And it, the moment your feedback from examiners starts piling up, and even these minor nitty-gritties are making it a long list of things that you didn't cover, that gives grounds to the examiner to say resubmit, and you might find that a lot of them, even when you are looking at, you say, hey, I should have done this in the first instance. I should have done this in the first instance. And now you are resubmitting. So if you do it in the first instance, you do it correctly. It shows the quality of the work, your professionalism, and the effort that you have put in the thesis. So I want to quickly go to the submission, how we submit. Now, hopefully some of you that are submitting next month, you've done everything that I have said, and the thesis is ready. Whether it's by article or by chapters, the thesis is ready. It is edited, all the appendices. I mean, I can say, for example, even you need to also add the letter from the editor to show that it was language edited, and use reputable editors so that it doesn't come back as a comment to say the language is poor. Use reputable editors that will do diligent job to the language editing. So your thesis is now ready. You want to submit. You submit the thesis to the main supervisor. Usually in the PhD, you will have 3 or 2 supervisors. You submit to your main supervisor because they need to look at it and say they are also happy. They are the one that will release it for examination. There is actually a form that the supervisors complete and sign to say, I, Dr. Charlotte Mugwatle, am releasing this thesis for examination. I confirm that it is the student's work, and I'm satisfied that it can be examined. So you submit to the main supervisor and make sure you include all the forms. There's a checklist in the faculty. I assume it is used by all departments in the faculty. If you don't have this, you can get from your supervisors. There's a checklist where you complete and you tick that I have included the article, I've checked my topic, I've included this, I've included the editor's letter, I've included my HDC approval, my RC approval. So you complete that check. You even sign the checklist as a student because it must be signed by the student, it must be signed by all the supervisors, and then the head of department. It is part of the pack that goes to the faculty office for examination. There's also a library form, but usually the library form is at the end when you're doing the final submission to say you're not owing anything in the library. But just make sure you have all the forms that you're supposed to have. There's also an affidavit template that you complete and you get it signed by the Commissioner of Oath to say this is your work. You are swearing under oath. Maybe some departments don't want it, but I know in our departments, we also add the affidavit to say you are swearing that everything you've submitted in the pack is your work and your original work and no one has done it for you. So that tomorrow when somebody comes back and say, you know what, I actually want to report so and so I've done the dissertation for them or the thesis for them, then we are like, but you did submit an affidavit. And then obviously you need to attach your articles as well. If you have published your articles, especially if it's by articles, you definitely need to have all those articles in the thesis, but maybe also add them individually, just as PDFs, as additional document, just in case they are needed. And your manuscripts that are in draft, if there are those that are in draft which were not part of the thesis, please include them as well to show the examiner that I said so many in draft, there they are, and then your Turnitin report. And with the Turnitin report, it must also be a recent Turnitin report. I mean, some students would do a Turnitin report in January, then you happen to submit, because of unforeseen circumstances, you submit in December, but you are submitting that Turnitin report that says January. That is not ideal. That is not ideal. And it also shows that maybe you did the literature review around that time. So always make sure you submit the Turnitin report that is recent. And also with the Turnitin report, when you submit it, label it with your name and surname. Say Mokwatle thesis, so that even the similarity report when you generate it, because sometimes some departments would require that you only take a snapshot of that first page of the similarity and just add it in the thesis as an appendix, and then maybe add the whole report now as a separate document. But if the examiner just wants to see the similarity index, then at least you've added just that one page. But at the top, it must show that it's your thesis with the surname and initials. And then obviously you submit usually via email in a zipped folder to your main supervisor. Sometimes you find that some colleagues in the faculty have designed a postgraduate module for you where you will then submit. So this will be specified by your supervisor. If you are submitting in a module that they've designed for you, that's where you're going to drop that folder. They will indicate accordingly, or you will submit to them via email. They will indicate accordingly. And then after you've submitted and your pack is nicely done, all the forms are there, then you sit back and relax. And then the supervisor will also do their own forms and send to the HOD to sign the checklist and everything. And then the supervisor is the one that submits to the faculty office and say, here's the pack, send to the examiners. Then from faculty office, the administrators in the faculty office, in this case, Rihanna is doing the PhDs. She's the one that will send out to all the examiners. The examiners normally get a guideline of what is expected from your thesis, and they use that guideline to mark your thesis. And then they will give the comments. The main supervisor is the one that will submit to the other supervisors for signature, and then accordingly. So you do your part, you submit to the main supervisor. Unless maybe, I know sometimes life does happen and there are other issues in the relationship of all the 3 or 4 of you, and then you are asked to submit to the other supervisors. Because sometimes, I mean, realistically, there can be tension, but ideally, professionally and academically, those tensions should be put aside. And whether it's between the 2 supervisors or whatever, those should be professionally put aside and work should be done. In this case, your main supervisor will send to the other supervisors. If they are not in agreement with each other, that is their own thing to sort until they are in agreement, and then the main supervisor is the one that will make sure that everything is in order, and then they submit to the faculty office for it to be submitted out to the examiners. I'm looking at my time, trying to move as fast as possible, but now you are done. You're not really done. You must now prepare for an oral defense. Remember, I said this has been introduced in the faculty, that after you submit for examination, you prepare for an oral defense. And I want to acknowledge the Vice Dean for Research, Professor Yelverton. These are some of his slides that I adapted to use in this presentation. He did a presentation on oral defense to students at some point. So I didn't need to reinvent the wheel here. But an oral defense is basically you now doing an oral presentation on your PhD. You engage with the assessors. It happens mostly 2 weeks after you have submitted for examination. It's an opportunity to engage with the assessors before the thesis results are completed. So usually the examiners are given around 6 to 8 weeks to examine. So they would have seen your thesis, they would have gone through it a bit or more, depending on each examiner. And then now you are invited into the oral defense. It's an opportunity to reflect and celebrate your work. And yes, it's an occasion that you are likely to remember. So what usually happens in the oral defense, just in summary, 25 to 30 minutes. It's an online presentation. So you will get an invitation. You will be given the date and the time of the oral defense. Normally there is a chair who's either the HOD or the Vice Dean or another member of the faculty. It's an independent person. And then your 3 examiners are there. A minimum of 2 is required. Your supervisor is also there to give you support, and they serve as an observer. So you go in there, you present your PhD, in summary, in that 30 minutes, mainly covering the critical aspects, your aims and objectives, your findings, critical findings, basically that abstract, that good abstract that you wrote, you put it into a nice PowerPoint presentation and you give it your best. And usually, like I said, you would have 3 examiners, 2 national, South Africans, and 1 must be international. So a few things can happen. Each of the examiners chooses an outcome of the thesis. So you've submitted the thesis, you've done the oral defense, and then you give them the allowance and the time to complete the marking. They can say no corrections. So all of the 3 of them can come back and say, we are satisfied with this thesis. We are very happy. No corrections are required. The degree can be conferred, and that would be the absolute joy. Some could say non-substantive corrections, which is what we call minor corrections, which are made to the satisfaction of the supervisor. And that is also a good outcome, and we're also joyous because they've given recommendations that they just want you to look into. Maybe you've missed 1 or 2 articles that they want you to capture and add, and then they want you to improve it, and you don't have to resubmit. That is also good. But some examiners can say substantive corrections, which is what we call major corrections, meaning you are resubmitting. They want to see it back. This is also okay. You are doing a PhD. Nothing has to be perfect. And what I've learned in my 13 years experience in academia, I've presented in international conferences. Not everyone is going to agree with you. People, especially those that are in your niche, in your focus area, there's always the other way of doing things. Someone could say you could have looked at this methodology. Someone could say you could have looked at that. You could have added this objective to this study. You didn't look at this model. You didn't incorporate this protocol or this legislation. So it is to better the output at the end of the day. And there's no one who would be more critical of your work than those that are in the same field, because most of the time some know more than you and some know more than your supervisors. That's the reality of academia and the science that is out there. The international examiner might be knowing other things from other countries because they are an expert in this. And it's not to bash your work. Always look at the comments from a positive angle. And one thing my supervisor has taught me, even when I'm responding to the corrections, because normally you would put them in a form and respond to them also in the form to show how you've addressed them. The first thing I always say, and this is one of the things I took from my supervisor, is to say thank you for the comments. Even if we don't agree with the comments, we start by saying thank you for the comments. We, however, do not agree with this element because we have used this element based on 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you look at this particular thing and that particular thing and that particular thing, and then you start explaining yourself, it doesn't mean you have to agree with them, especially if your supervisor is also saying, no, this examiner, I think, misunderstood us here. Let's clarify. Then you do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But I can tell you, most of the time, the major corrections are also added, not necessarily by the science of what you've done, but also by the minor elements that I've mentioned in the beginning, which could have been avoided. If there is really a lot of science that you didn't address, yes, maybe you and your supervisors missed something, but that is not likely, especially because you have 2 or 3 supervisors that are also experts in this, and their name is also on this. They wouldn't want to put their name on something that is substandard, you know. So ideally, most of the time, the science is there. The academic rigor is there. Usually because the student, there are those students who really miss a lot of things, even after the supervisor has said 4 times you must do this. And you start annoying the supervisor, they will submit. And then you will get back. But most of the time, supervisors are professional. That's why it's a back and forth between you and the supervisor, because they don't want to put their name and signature on substandard work. I also don't do that with my students. And we will do it until we get it right. So major corrections, but sometimes because the science has missed something, someone can say major corrections, resubmit, I want to see it back. And then the worst case scenario is reject. I haven't experienced this personally, even from other colleagues in the department, because most of the time, not most of the time, all the time, the results would serve in our departmental research committee before they go to higher degrees committee. So we get an opportunity to actually see all the results of all the students. I don't remember where we saw a results that said reject, and the examiners the examiner was rejecting the whole thing. I haven't experienced that personally, but for the fact that it's there, it means it can happen. But even the first one can happen, even the second one can happen. I can share my story. Out of all the 3 examiners, I didn't resubmit to any of them. All of them said they were happy and they gave recommendations on what we can improve, what I can improve to the satisfaction of the supervisors. I did that. My supervisor looked, we were happy, we moved forward. I didn't submit to any of the examiners. And I am evidence that it is possible, because most of the time the supervisor will say, usually one examiner will want to see it back. Well, I'm evidence that sometimes it does happen that none of the examiners want to see it back, especially if you've done what you were required to do. So now back to everything else, the examination, the oral defense as well. When you go in there and you are presenting in that 30 minutes, remember, you know your work better than anyone else. This is your PhD. You have done it. You have done the data collection. There's no one else who can answer it better than you. That's why even your supervisor is there just for moral support. But this is your study. No one can tell you better about your own study. Even if they come with a different angle, a different opinion, it's okay. But you've got a reason why you did it the way you did it, and you've substantiated those reasons in your thesis, in your methodology. So that is the one thing. The other thing is everyone wants you to pass. Even your supervisors, as difficult as the students will always say the supervisors are difficult, we want you to pass. We all want you to pass. Even the examiners want you to pass. But remember, this is not a giveaway. Otherwise, everyone will be having a PhD. You put in the work, you put in the academic rigor, you put in the scientific part of it, then you will be given that PhD. Everyone wants you to develop your work further. So the feedback, sometimes it hurts, even from supervisors, from reviewers that are reviewing your journal articles, if you're doing the thesis by articles. It's painful, but I have also learned to take the feedback positive. No matter what they've written, I read it and I say, yeah, this is the view of the reviewer. This is the view. Let me see what they are saying and what I can take from it and develop my work further. That is it. We're in academia. We're in science. So I want to share a little bit of my personal experience in the few minutes that is left. Remember, I spoke about the dedication. Well, with my own personal experience, I wrote the dedication first, and it was my daily petrol. There are days where I was not in it, and I would set aside time and say, today I'm writing. And when I get to the library, also you would use a different venue. I wouldn't come to the office. I would go to a different campus as well, book one of those postgraduate rooms at APK. I would sit there, but I can tell you the first hour, I wouldn't just be in it. And those days are there. And I would read my dedication. I wrote it nicely in bold, and I would read it. This thesis is dedicated to my late father, to my mother, who did this and this, my siblings, my children, my husband. And I'm being honest, it would give me some motivation of some sort to say, well, if you are not doing it for yourself, then do it for these people, you know? So I found that that dedication really took me through a lot of the times where I was on a bit of a low energy level as well. Also in my thesis, I added, after the declaration, remember, I said you go to abstract. But before the abstract, I added scholarly outputs related to the study. And we do this in our department. Even the thesis I read recently from one of our students who published by article, whom I'm going to share his experience, he also did that. Just after the declaration, we add scholarly outputs related to the study. So you can find that from the supervisors if you can add that, because we find that it gives some value to already give the examiner what you have done, what you have put into this PhD. Even if you have one article published and you're doing it by chapters, but maybe you did some conference presentations, you did some seminars, you did some symposiums, you add those. And if there's a link you can add, you add them. I mean, I can tell you with my study, I even got an award at Lund University in Sweden, in a doctoral forum where we were presenting our doctoral studies and they chose the best oral presentation. I got the award and I even gave them the link of the Instagram page of that doctoral forum. So all those things, I did a lot of symposiums because I was doing my study also with the SAMRC. They host a lot of symposiums during the year and we were presenting. Sometimes you just go and present the update of your study, how far you are at this symposium, but it's work you've put in. You add all those things, poster presentations, even in the faculty, at faculty level, maybe you've done a poster presentation, you add those are scholarly outputs related to your study. So I found that it really helped. And in our department, we do it for all our students. And then One of my other experiences, like I've mentioned, remember the supervisors are on your side. And I must say, you can see the disclaimer there. This is my personal experience. This are not the views of the faculty or the university. Um, so I say the supervisors are on your side, and I say, okay, at least one of them is on your side, definitely. But you can lean on the supervisors. I was leaning on my supervisors as experts in the field. Sometimes even for a little bit of personal experiences, like I've shared, I gave birth to the twins at the crux of my PhD in my fourth year, where I was busy with the write-up and the chapters, and then the twins came. I was able to lean on my supervisors even for those personal circumstances where I would really say, you know what, I'm not coping because of this and this and that. I'm not able to submit. It's not excuses. Yes, the one supervisor would understand, the other one would say, but Charlotte, remember, we need to push. And they're doing that because they are on your side. They want you to pass, they want you to finish. Um, I've also found that personally, if you share with family and friends, um, I have two siblings, brothers. I'm the firstborn. So the last born was my go-to person, a person that I could tell when I was winning, but I could also tell when I was losing. And when those reviewers came back, the feedback from the supervisors came back, I would even take a snapshot and say, sure, look at what this supervisors is saying. And then he would say in our mother tongue, "La wawuswina," and which means, yeah, the supervisor has you right because you didn't do the right thing, you know? But it's someone that will hold you accountable. Someone will check on you now and then. So how are you doing? You know, and sometimes when you have deadlines, share the deadlines with them so that they can remind you and say, yeah, I hope you have that chapter ready. Remember, tomorrow is submission. They sort of become like your social supervisor or your family supervisor in some way, but they help you get through and they hold you accountable as well. And you will put them in their dedication as well for all their effort. So I found that helped me a lot. So find your own person that you can lean on, that you who can hold you accountable. And then at your low energy level, do the simple stuff. Sometimes you are really not in a mood to do the scientific part of things, but use the time wisely to still push the other things, you know, add your annexures, do the headings, do the abbreviations, do the list of symbols, do the technical terms, because those are not so, you know, scientific and requiring you to put your attention and put your phone on silent. Do the simple stuff, but don't just sit and let time go, because time waits for no man. And it's a challenging journey that has started, that you have started. Make sure that it ends successfully. The fact that you took the decision to register for the PhD, I give you a pat on the back. And you are at proposal stage, you are at data collection stage, you are at write-up stage. You have already pushed. You have already done a lot. Don't look back, because you are not going back. You are going forward. No matter the circumstances, you look forward, you say, here's the situation. How do I sort it out? I mean, I'm a classic example. I was the head of department at that time. I had twins. I had the PhD. It was a nightmare. But I said, Charlotte, what do you want? I wanted to complete my PhD. Not only because it was one of the requirements for the job. Yes, we all know in academia you must complete your PhD, but personally as well. I wanted to complete the PhD, whether I was going to stay in academia or go somewhere else. That is what I wanted to do. So life will happen, let it happen. And the nice thing about academia is that we even have room. I mean, if really, God forbid, we've had a student who was in a car accident for you know, and then was in hospital for some time, you apply for abeyance for that year. You know, sometimes some of you are mothers, you will fall pregnant, apply for abeyance for that year. You can take an abeyance for 1 year, which will not count in the years of your study, but it needs to go through your supervisor and be approved at HTC. then that year you will see on your academic record, it will say abeyance. Then you take time, you go give birth, you deal with the baby for that, then you come back and then you give it your best again and you make sure it ends successfully. Maybe not for you, but for those people in your dedication. And then this is the experience of one of our PhD students. I'll just say it quickly, but you probably can read the rest in the slides. He actually graduated yesterday for his PhD. He did his PhD by publication, by articles, and he published 7 articles, from the PhD. His name is Vincent Mpaga. And this is someone that I taught in 2011 when I joined UJ in the national diploma. So we took him from the national diploma to master's, and yesterday he was graduating for his PhD. He's a father, he's married, he is working in industry somewhere in Limpopo in one of the municipalities. And he says, I quote, "My doctoral research was publication-based, culminating in the successful publication of 7 articles in international journals throughout the course of the study. Completing the PhD through publication has been rewarding and fulfilling, as it helped me to contribute to the body of knowledge. Furthermore, this approach helped me to become a reviewer for various journals." You can already see one of the advantages. When I began my PhD, I found myself unsure whether to write traditional chapters for my dissertation or to focus on getting my work published in academic journals. Whilst I was awaiting approval to start my research, I worked on the first 3 chapters of my thesis. Everything changed when my supervisor, Prof. Ratebe, suggested that we submit the research proposal for publication. Remember that protocol publication. The decision opened a whole new direction for my journey. My protocol was published. With the first 3 chapters already completed, I was able to identify gaps, motivated to write both a critical review and a systematic review, which were also published. After having the first 3 chapters of my thesis published, I then focused on writing the 2 results papers, one which was published and the other which has been accepted for publications. You can see, going through the PhD has also taught me the importance of daily reading. Completing my studies to publication has helped me to grow emotionally, especially when it came to dealing with feedback from reviewers. Initially, I found their comments to be quite harsh and took them personally. However, after several submissions, I came to realize that the reviewers aim to help improve the quality of our work and to ensure it meets the highest standard before publication. Despite facing challenges with delayed reviewer feedback sometimes, imagine my PhD has been, ending my PhD has been a fulfilling journey. I've had the opportunity to present my research in various settings and has greatly enhanced my presentation skills and confidence. Balancing my PhD study with a full-time job has been a valuable learning experience. It has taught me the importance of setting clear goals and sticking to a work schedule. Throughout this process, pursuing a PhD has often felt like managing another full-time job, requiring commitment and discipline to successfully navigate both academia and professional demands. I hope you can pick up the benefits of it. I have a few tips which I will go through in 1 minute so that we have at least the 20 minutes for questions and answers. The moment the proposal is approved, you start writing and you start publishing, meaning you can publish your protocol. You can do a systematic review or a scoping review and publish that. If you're writing your chapters, you can do chapter 1, you can do chapter 2 already, and even chapter 3, that is methodology, because the moment the proposal is approved, it is officially game on. There is no turning back from it. Open a thesis write-up folder and subfolders. Every time you search, you find articles, throw them in the relevant folders. I had a folder for methodology, for results, because I already knew in the results and in the recommendations I may need to refer to. I had everything under their folders: literature review, recommendations. Anything I found, I would throw it in there as I read. Sometimes I also find that as I was reading work for my students, which was my advantage because I was supervising whilst I was doing the PhD, I would read work for my students and find relevant articles that would work in my PhD. And then I would save them so that when I want to start working on them, I know exactly how to easily locate them and obviously update my EndNote so that the references are added there. Have a writing plan that suits you and your productivity level. You know your other demands in life, your work, your family. Have a writing plan. Some people would say 2 hours a day in the morning would do you wonders. And others would prefer, okay, no, I will do an entire day, one day in a week. Someone will say, no, because I'm a full-time employee for a municipality, I will do a Saturday or a Sunday, full day, or nighttime. You know what works best for you. Do it and stick to it. You will see the results. Have a notepad and a pen. I am old school, you can tell. I always had a notepad and a pen in the bag, even over the weekend, even at home, even at a funeral, even at a party, because the PhD becomes part of it. Sometimes I would be at home and then I would remember, oh, I need to read that article for this and this. Oh, I forgot this. You note it down. But these days were so advanced, you can self-record yourself. Whilst you think about these things, it doesn't have to be written down on a piece of paper. You can even text yourself on WhatsApp or some other way that will remind you. Whatever works for you, make it happen. If you're doing it by chapters, still publish your protocol and your literature and have the manuscript result as a draft. It will help you rather than to wait to have a publication later. Now you've done everything, you are being held by the publication. And remember, the publication depends on the journals, whether they're accepting it or not. Now imagine you've done everything, but you are waiting for a publication. You can't graduate if one paper is not published. That's a fact. And then I've spoken about Turnitin, I won't repeat. A reputable language editor. One of the comments that came from all the three examiners of my PhD, was that the document was accurately and professionally language edited. All the three of them said that. I'm not going to tell you how much I paid that language editor, but it's a reputable person who was professional, who edited that document accordingly. I could pay any amount for a person that, because you do pay on your own, but all three examiners were happy and none of them said it needs to be re-edited for some reason or another. Be honest in the limitations of the study and obviously indicate all the strengths which will strengthen, use all sources of information like I've mentioned earlier. Those are my sources. I want to also acknowledge our student graduated yesterday. I congratulate him in absentia. He has even started serving as a course supervisor, and his journey has begun in academia whilst he's still serving in government. I've acknowledged our Vice Dean, whom I've shared some of his presentations, the guidelines as well. I'm sure you can access them from the faculty website or from Rihanna or from your supervisor if need be. If everything else fails, from everything I've said in the past hour, and you are still not getting the energy and the level and you're on a low down, I always say to my students, picture the graduation day. Picture yourself in that beautiful outfit, standing on stage, your name being called, your abstract being read, your family is there to cheer you. I can tell you, if you picture that day, definitely you will stand up and go and write, because that day is not going to come unless you do the work. That's the reality. But it will be one of the best days of your life that you will not forget. That one, I can bet my money on it. I wish you the absolute best in your studies. No matter where you are, what matters is that you have started, you are in the middle, you're almost at the end. Push to your best, give it your best, and achieve what you wanted to achieve. I thank you. Ke a leboga. I will stop sharing and then we can take a few questions also in the 15 minutes that is left. I actually thought I would finish much earlier, but yeah, I took a little bit long, but that's okay. Apologies for that, but we still have 15 minutes for questions if there are any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Charlotte Mokgwetla. We really appreciate you so much, for giving us such, a refreshing, session. And even though it was thesis format and submission procedures, but it really came with a lot of, sharing as you shared with us, your personal experiences. It was very insightful, your student experiences as well. So thank you so much for sharing such. And also this inspires all the, the doctoral students that are here with us today, to complete, their studies, and to complete their PhDs, even though everybody is at different stages. But we really appreciate you for your insightful and your experiences and sharing everything with us. And thank you so much again to you, Dr. Charlotte. And in that stage now, we can now take questions. There were some questions in the chat box. I don't know if you would prefer people to raise their hands, then they can speak, or what? How do you want to go about it? Or I must read out some of the questions in the chat box, Dr. Charlotte.
Okay, I think we can take hands first, and then once we've exhausted the hands, then I will answer, because when we are done, I can always go back to the chat and respond to people personally. I'll take another 15 minutes or so and go to the chat and still respond, and people can still get other responses if they've put questions in the chat. But we can take hands first.
Okay, perfect. So I have unmuted everybody's mic. So if you do have any contribution or any questions that you like to ask, please kindly unmute your mic and you may go ahead and speak. Thank you. So everyone's mic has been unmuted. I've enabled everybody's mic. So you can just raise your hand or you can unmute your mic and go forward with your contribution or your question. Thank you.
Okay, I see Dimakaso has a question.
Yes.
Dimakaso, go ahead.
Hello, Dr. Charlotte. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was wonderful. I wanted to ask if you have not done any presentations or seminars or been to those things, if you are on the shy side, would that still negatively impact you as you on your journey to graduation? And the second one is, as well as the publications, if you've only published your master's dissertation, would it also impact you on that side as well? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Timakazo. So firstly, if you haven't done seminars or conferences, that's okay. That's not going to influence you in a negative way. But it's always a cherry on top. But if you haven't done them, it's okay. Then you wouldn't have that scholarly contribution. But ideally, throughout the journey, it is encouraged that you start sharing your work. What I found, one of the comments that came even from all the three examiners was that because I had already published the protocol paper, which is mostly the methodology part, they didn't even have a lot of comments for that chapter. They just said the methodology was published in an international journal. Congratulations to the students and the supervisors for this. Minor comments to just improve it. That was it. So you could see that publishing the protocol paper actually gave me an advantage, because I mean, ideally, how would they argue with a methodology that has been published in an international journal? So that is the advantage. But if you didn't have conferences and seminars, it's not a train smash. But remember, the article is ideal for you to graduate. So when you submit for examination, ideally it's best to have that one article published, so that you are ready, you go for examination, and you know that when the comments come back, you will deal with the comments, you are meeting the requirement. for graduation. If you are doing it by chapters, it would be one article published. But if you are doing it by thesis by article, definitely when it goes for examination, you need to have those 4 articles published because that is the PhD. That is your thesis. There's no other way of doing it. So the publications are a must. I hope you
Thank you.
answered, Timakato.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Asante, Cynthia, over to you.
I also have twin boys, and I mean, there are days I'm like, it's so difficult, but hearing you share your experience has really, really gingered me on. In terms of the oral defense, I'd like to find out whether it's open to the general public. So I hear you say there'll be 2 supervisors or reviewers in country who are South Africans, and then 1 international reviewer. I'd like to know to the general public, as we do it in Ghana, for the doctoral thesis. Thank you and over.
Okay. Thank you, Cynthia, and all the best with the twins. Definitely, it is doable with the twins. I am evidence of that. With the oral defense, it's not open to the public. The one in our faculty is not open to the public. It will be the chair, it will be your supervisor, it will be your examiners. Remember, if you are registered here at UJ, you have 3 examiners, 2 national examiners, which will be chosen in South Africa, and 1 international examiner. Your supervisor is the one who will choose the examiners. You actually don't even have information of who the examiners are until you now meet them in the oral defense. But no, it's not open to the public. It is those people and yourself presenting. For that 30 minutes, you answer the questions and then you will leave the room. Then they will deliberate on your presentation and then go and finalize the rest of the examination and submit the feedback to the faculty. I hope you answered, Cynthia. Thank you.
Yes, that answers
Ndivo,
my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cynthia. Ndivo, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Doc. I just want to ask a question about thesis by journal articles. I hear you saying we need to have 4 articles. So I want to ask if conference proceedings are also counted as articles, or do we have to submit to or accredited only journals?
Okay, so conference proceedings would also count if you have done a full paper and the conference is accredited. Remember, even similarly now, if I go present at International Conference of Public Health and the conference is accredited for research units, then that counts. Usually, if it was a journal, it would be 1 unit. If it's a conference, it's 0.5 units. So if it's an accredited conference, then it will definitely count. And you have presented, but you've also done the full paper. Then you will put that article, because it will literally be like an article that would have gone to a journal, but you've done the full paper as part of the conference proceedings. That will count. I hope you answered, Ndibo.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions from the participants? If you do have any contribution, any other questions, please kindly raise your hand. Okay, there he is. I'm Lucy. Svanda, if you can unmute and go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much to Dr. Charlotte. It was a very powerful and very enlightening presentation. I enjoyed it very much. I just wanted to find out, is it possible for one who is perhaps writing a thesis, like using the chapters, that first like scenario that you described, to suddenly change along the way and decide to do it by by publication? Is it possible? Is it fluid like that I can change along the way? Maybe as it is right now, I'm towards the final stages of my thesis. Can I suddenly make a turnaround and do it by publication? Is it allowed?
Melusi, it is allowed, because when you register, you don't register and say, I will do my PhD by publication, or I will do my PhD by chapters. The initial steps of you doing a proposal, getting it approved at HTC, REC, getting your site approval, doing the data collection and the data analysis, it's the same in both formats. It's now right at the end where you are putting a thesis together, where it now differentiates you to say, what kind of a thesis are you putting? But obviously, with the one by articles, you would have done the initial work, because you would have published probably the protocol in the first year, and then maybe in the second year, you have published a scoping review or a systematic review, and then you have published results for your first chapter, and you would now be having the last paper to publish. So I would think now, if you are at the end and you are in your 5th year or 6th year, because remember, there's also the issue of time and how long you have been registered for. I saw there's a question of maximum time for duration to complete. It depends if you are registered on a part-time or full-time basis, but ideally 4 years you should be done. 5 years you can apply an extension of studies for another year or so. But this is a discussion now between you and your supervisors, and especially depending on at what stage you are. If you are in the final stages, you've done everything, you haven't published the first paper, you are working on the first publication, which is the results, then would you go back and start wanting to publish a systematic review and wanting to publish a protocol? I think there would be a challenge, a bit of challenges in there. So you would need to sit down and be realistic and say, unless, some PhDs are good, that right at the end, it is in such a way that you have 4 drafts. Maybe you had 7 objectives. You had 4 drafts of publications that you've worked on, and it's just a matter of identifying the journals, because remember, the publications are not in your control. You are at the mercy of the journals, accepting it, doing the review, sending it back, and finally publishing your paper. So, and most journals have their own turnaround times. Some journals publish quarterly, some journals publish every month, some are open access, some publish annually. So it's an exercise you would need to sit down and say, okay, I'm at the end, I want to publish all my articles. Do I have journals? How long will the journals take to give me feedback? And eventually, because the journals do indicate from the time they receive your paper, up to how long do they respond, the first response, and then up to how long the length for you to get that paper published. So it's an exercise that I think you would need to sit down with your supervisors and say, where are we? Yes, we have enough material and results to write 4 papers right now, but to which journal are we going to submit? How long will the journal take? Do I still have time as a student to wait for these journals, work on the corrections and everything, and then put a thesis by article instead of the traditional chapters? That's a discussion you're going to have with your supervisors. I see you still have your hand up. You can follow up.
Thank you very much. I'm actually answered on that one. I have another question, and I think this would be the last one.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to do with, because I'm towards the final stages of my thesis. Now, there are days where you feel like you really not contributing. You can't understand like what you're doing. You feel like there's nothing substantive or big that you are contributing into academia. You feel like your research is a bit not strong enough. And then suddenly through your reading, you come across stuff that's almost exactly like what you are doing. And you feel like you're basically repeating what someone has already done out there. What happens if perhaps a study that you're working on, someone has already published? Because with what I'm doing, it seems like there are papers that are getting published almost now and again. And I see papers that are published in 2025, quite similar to what I am doing. And that gives you a feeling where you feel quite defeated. I don't know how do you navigate such a space?
Okay. If I was your supervisor, for example, firstly, I would be happy that people are publishing things that are similar to yours, because then the approach would be that definitely this is an area of interest for research, because already in this context, they have published this. In context B, they have published that. And we, in context C, are bringing this element. There is always something that would be unique that your study is contributing, whether it's the context of where you are doing the study, or whether it's the context of the methodology that you are using. I mean, when you look at research, there's research where it could be the exact same project in the UK and in South Africa, but here with us, then there's dynamics of cultural issues, social issues, Ubuntu, where we come from as a country. That just makes your project unique, even if it's the exact same project that was done in the UK. So don't look at other authors contributing to what you're doing as a negative thing. Actually, it is a positive thing. It's like right now, everyone is buying a Haval. I mean, I also wish I had a Haval. So it's the same concept that it means there's something unique about the Haval, the technology, this and this. So you need to find what is unique in your study that is adding into what everyone else is doing. But already it means there's something interesting in what you're doing. Otherwise, why would everyone else be interested in it? You know? So take it from that angle and then look for that uniqueness, that contribution that yours is bringing on top of everyone. It's like a puzzle. Definitely yours is a piece of the puzzle, but maybe it's a triangle that is face down compared to the other triangle that is faced up or whatever, but there will always be a contribution to what you have done.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, Chair,
Yes,
I
thank you
don't
so much.
see any other hands, and just to be professional and stick to the time, I'm out of breath right now, but I appreciate also the comments. I'm seeing comments. I appreciate it. This is actually my first RCD request to do a presentation, and even when I accepted, I said, "Oh, they're taking me back to the traumas." Maybe this was also rehabilitative for me,
Yes,
but I
yes,
enjoyed
thank
the
you.
session as well. And I hope I at least motivated someone out there who's doing their PhD to say, look forward to that graduation day when you finally finish and cross the stage. And I wish you
No,
all the
certainly,
best. Thank you.
certainly, certainly. There were a few questions, but in the chat box, I don't know if you would like to handle those, Doc, or we can end the session. I think it's just like a few, most of them were comments.
I'm trying to see.
I see Johannes was like, what is the acceptable duration for the completion of a thesis by article? Then there's a comment. There's a comment there.
Yeah, and everyone just needs to be cognizant of if they're registered part-time and full-time and when they need to finish. Definitely, whether it's by chapters or by article, you need to finish at your maximum time and complete the qualification. What I know is the faculty is quite strict these days that students must finish within their minimum time, and they will only entertain extension of studies under very dire circumstances. So try by all means to finish on time. If you do
Okay.
need to extend for a year, you must apply, but it's an application, it's not a given, and they do look at the circumstances.
I think you answered this one where someone said, at what stage do you inform the faculty if you'll be doing your thesis by chapters or by articles if you have previously agreed to go by chapters? I think you have answered that one. Great moments just there. Comments, no questions from my side. No, this question by Mabena. Mabena, did you have your hand raised there? Was that Mabena? Okay. He said,
Yes, I would appreciate if you maybe go to that comment. Thank you.
okay.
Thank you.
So Mabena says in the 2025 academic rules and regulation of the Faculty of Health Science, it states that it is expected for candidates in collaboration with their supervisors to have prepared for publication 2 manuscripts in a ready to submit format in accordance with the UJ policy and procedures. So my question, which policy specifically states the 4 articles must be published prior to the submission for examination?
Okay. I made reference to our guidelines. I don't know if I have them open here. No, I think I have the document closed, but we've got guidelines. No, I don't have open. I wanted to share. We've got guidelines on the guidelines that I've made, Faculty of Health Sciences guidelines that I have mentioned, that you can get hold of them, that stipulates if you are doing a thesis by article, how many articles you need to have. So the 2 is if it's a master's. The 2 articles, if you're doing a master's by article, then it will be 2 publications published. But if it's a PhD thesis by article, then it is 4. It is mentioned in the guidelines.
Okay, perfect. Then also somebody asked if
I'm not sure the person who was asking, which department are you in?
Hi, Dr. Charlotte. I'm in the Human Anatomy and Physiology department.
Okay, who's your
And
supervisor?
Professor Nkomozepi,
Or what's his name again?
Pilani.
Pilani, yeah. Just
Yes,
ask
yes.
Pilani about it, about the guidelines. But the guidelines
Okay.
are there. It does mention for masters is 2 articles published, but for PhD it's not less than 4 articles published for a
Oh, okay.
PhD by article.
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
And then
again.
someone is asking about, Tepisa is asking about the Turnitin report to say the cutoff score, is it 15% or 20%? At faculty level, it is 20%, as far as I know. It must not be more than 20%. Unless maybe your supervisor is very, very strict for whatever reason and they want 15%. Remember, I said some disciplines vary. Maybe you are doing research on a particular area and they know that your examiners, there's some speciality in the area or the niche that you are doing and they want 15%. There's nothing wrong with that. But we use, even for proposals, we use 20%, not more than 20%, even for thesis, not more than 20%. But if they want it at 15%, then you give them 15%. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much there, Dr. Charlotte, for answering all those questions. I hope everybody's answered there. Thank you so much again, and thank you to all the participants again for joining the session. Hope it was very insightful for everybody. And just a reminder that I've shared a feedback survey, and it will be thankful for you to please provide all these comments that you were giving out in the feedback survey so that we will also send this feedback survey to Dr. Charlotte for her portfolio as well. So we will be sending her the stats for this workshop as well as the feedback survey. So would really appreciate it if everybody fills in the feedback survey. In that regard, I would like to thank you again, Dr. Charlotte, for honoring our invite and for preparing to giving this presentation. We really appreciate you so much here at the Research Capacity Development. And thank you so much to all the postgraduate students who are here today to listen to this very insightful thesis format and submission procedure. In that regard, and I also have mentioned that for the recording, we can enroll you on our model communities. Please kindly email us at rcdinquiries@uj.ac.za, and we'll also share it also via email with our YouTube link as well to everybody who has sent us an email. So thank you so much again, and enjoy the rest of your day further. In that regard, is there anything else that you'd like to add before we can end the session, Dr. Charlotte?
No, just to say thank you. And I saw my profile was saying PhD medical sciences. You're going to make my students upset. It's a doctoral degree in environmental health.
Oh, apologies for that. Apologies for that one.
Yeah, no,
Dr.
don't
Shah.
worry. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
No, thank you so much for the invite, and I enjoyed the sessions as well. Stay blessed.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you so
Thanks.
much to
Thank
everybody.
you.
And thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day further. I will now
Thank
be
you.
ending the session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.